Ladies and gentlemen, we have some absolutely incredible breaking news today. You see, yesterday evening, the House Republicans successfully voted to pass a bill called the quote, No Rogue Rulings Act. And let me tell you what, this bill changes everything. Now, take a look at this report. Breaking news. House passes historic bill limiting activist judges by razor-thin margin. Republicans just secured a major victory to rein in rogue district courts. The final vote, 218 to 214, with nearly every Democrat opposing judicial reform. The bill curbs the power of individual district judges to block national policies through nationwide injunctions, a tactic frequently used against President Trump and his administration's policies. This marks a significant win for the GOP's judicial reform agenda. Democrats fought hard but came up short by just 4 votes. So folks, needless to say, this bill has the potential to change absolutely everything. As you all know, for months now, President Trump has been getting roadblocked by a never-ending series of hyper-progressive federal judges who have taken it upon themselves to do everything they possibly can to undermine President Trump's constitutionally granted authority. And by the way, that's not just me saying that. Take a look at this.
There are those who believe that we are in real time living through an assault on the constitutional order. Do you believe that we are in a constitutional crisis right now?
Yes, our democracy is at risk because Donald Trump shows that he wishes to violate the laws in many, many different ways. The good news here is we did put 235 judges, progressive judges, judges not under the control of Trump last year on the bench, and they are ruling against Trump time after time after time.
So you hear that, folks? That was Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer just plainly admitting that the Democrats have been appointing federal judges for the sole and exclusive purpose of undermining President Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, these radical progressives are about as shameless as they are insane, and that is saying a lot. Now, folks, we have a lot more to talk about today, but first, I want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news coverage, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, you know what? You know how Chuck Schumer just said that we're facing a constitutional crisis? Is there any truth to that? Well, actually, yes, just not the type that he is talking about. You see, quite literally every single time one of these federal injunctions has made its way to the U.S. Supreme Court, you know what's happened? The Supreme Court has sided with President Trump and his constitutionally granted presidential authority. In fact, as a quick reminder, so far the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that President Trump, as the chief executive, can freeze and reallocate federal funding as he sees fit. They also ruled that President Trump does, in fact, have the executive authority to cut DEI out of all federally funded institutions across the nation. And, as of just a couple days ago, they ruled that President Trump does, in fact, have the authority to invoke the Alien Enemies Act and to deport and detain illegal immigrant terrorists that are currently residing within our country. And so, folks, the reason why we just did that little Supreme Court recap is to show that, yes, we do have a constitutional crisis right now. And that crisis is that all of these unelected, hyper-progressive, highly partisan federal judges have been egregiously overstepping their judicial bounds, attempting to undermine the democratically elected president of the United States of America. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is why this bill that just got passed in the House is so important. But okay, so folks, here's what happens next. Now that this bill has successfully passed through the House, it needs to make its way through the Senate. However, here's the problem. Normally, bills like this require 60 votes in the Senate to pass, and right now the Republicans only have 53 votes. However, there is a maneuver called the nuclear option, which the Senate Republicans could employ in order to get this bill passed with just 51 votes. That said, this nuclear option is incredibly risky because what it would do is effectively change the rules of the Senate going forward such that future bills would also only require 51 votes. So, needless to say, while this nuclear option might help President Trump and the Senate Republicans right now, it could very easily backfire in the future if the Republicans were to ever lose control of the Senate. But with all of that being said, it is worth acknowledging that these radically progressive federal judges are currently doing so much damage to our country. Rumor has it that Trump and the Senate Republicans are currently considering going nuclear. And so, of course, if they choose to go down that route, we would be risking nuclear backlash from the Democrats at some point in the future. And so the big decision is this. Is this ongoing situation with these hyper-progressive federal judges a big enough issue that it's worth taking a risk with the nuclear option, then just sort of shooting from the hip and hoping for the best as we move forward? Or should we try to find another way to disempower all of these progressive federal injunctions? Because keep in mind, it's possible that these federal judges can actually be reined back in by working something through the Supreme Court. But even then, nothing in the Supreme Court is guaranteed either, considering Justice Roberts and Justice Barrett's are pretty much completely unpredictable. Luckily, in the last couple Supreme Court cases, at least one of them has managed to vote in favor of actually putting America first. But really, with these two, all bets are off. There are no promises. So you know what, folks? In the next couple weeks, maybe even the next couple days, we might end up having a solution to this ongoing issue with all of these radically progressive federal judges. The America First movement might just be about ready to go nuclear in the Senate. But in the meantime, at least we can be happy that, as we said earlier, every single one of these federal injunctions that have made their way to the U.S. Supreme Court have actually ended up getting overruled and tossed out. Time and time again, President Trump's America First agenda has been vindicated after getting pressed by all of these radical progressives. Because the reality is, President Trump has the authority, and he's using that authority to provide real results to Americans. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, pretty much so far, we've just been winning nonstop. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we all voted for President Trump. Because now, finally, we are putting America first. Now, folks, before we wrap up with today's video, I want to say real quick that I've actually gone ahead and made a community Facebook page where I'll be posting additional news and updates as it relates to all of this stuff. So, hey, if you guys use Facebook, check out the pinned comment down below and give that page a follow. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Should we go nuclear? Let me know. Please like the video while you're down there. As I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today. And of course, as always, stay safe.